Welcome back to another edition of Recruiter Fuel, and this time we're talking about intake sessions. Now let me set this up before we get into the conversation. Tim and Andrew, thank you for joining me again.
Absolutely.
So yesterday I had a call with a recruiter, corporate side recruiter, who's been with the organization for about 5 years. And we were talking about the intake session, and he proceeds to tell me he doesn't do intake sessions at all. Now, he's the corporate recruiter, does the primarily the more senior positions. So I asked him, I said, why don't you do it? He said, well, I've been here for 5 years. I know all the jobs, I know all the managers. I don't ever need to do an intake session. What are your thoughts on that, Tim?
Horrible idea.
Why? Why is that so horrible?
Because things change, and you need to know. Yeah, you might know the culture, you might know the manager, but every position's different, every team is different, and as you bring in more and more people, the nuances change, the things change, and you need to sit down with the manager and really understand what they need and what the team needs and how to best put the next person in that role to help the team grow and be successful.
Andrew, what's your experience with this whole intake thing? You've been doing this a long time.
My intake is 6 pages. I prefer to have an hour long where I'm doing most of the question asking and people are doing the answering. I think if you don't ask questions really till you're blue in the face on things that matter about the role, things about the culture, the soft skills, a lot of other things, that you're not really going to A, be able to find the right candidate, and B, going to be able to communicate the position to the people you're talking to. I think the intake is the most vital part of the whole recruiting process because it's garbage in, garbage out. If you don't have all the information you need, how are you really going to find the right person?
But I've got a job description, Tim. Isn't that enough?
No, it's just words on paper. It's just words on paper. That's
Yeah.
all it is. And you have to understand why people are looking for those certain skills, and you really have to dive into, well, do you actually need all this stuff? Because like I said, every position's different, every team is different, and you can have all the different things on a piece of paper. When you ask the manager, hey, what's really important on there? They're like, oh, well, this. Well, it's not even on the piece of paper.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you need to ask between the lines what is really needed and kind of dive into that, because a lot of the time you could have 20 things on the resume or the job description, but there's only 2 things that are really actually relevant.
You bring up a good point, Andrew. In your experience in doing this, how often does the job description align perfectly with the intake?
Never. And the job descriptions are to the point now where we even redo all the job descriptions. I won't just, because you want to have a more accurate reflection of what the job is so that people can understand, not only what the job really entails, but then when they're talking to the person that's interviewing them, they're going to sync up. They're not going to be, one person going one way, the other person going the other.
Yeah, no kidding. What do you really look for when you're doing the intake session, Tim? I mean, you mentioned a couple of things already, kind of the soft skills. Andrew mentioned that as well. But if you had to break it down into kind of groupings, what do you really think a recruiter needs to ask in order to really understand and make the most out of that intake?
Well, you really need to know what the manager is looking for, not just what's on that piece of paper, but really what is the end result of this position? What do they need this person for? And by asking those questions, the manager starts thinking, be like, oh, okay, well, I really need them to do this, this, and this. Or we might have a rollout and we need them to be a part of this. And they start thinking a little bit more, well, really, the key skills I need are these things. And as you ask those questions and get to know exactly why they need that role, why they need that person in there, and what that is actually going to do to the team and help the company, you really get to understand exactly what that person is supposed to be doing there, not just the words on pages.
Andrew, some of the questions you ask.
A lot of my stuff is around why is the position open?
Why does that matter?
Because it's very different when it's a role that you can sell, hey, they're expanding, they need more people, versus, oh, somebody left.
Or I've fired the last 3 people.
Yeah, exactly. How many people have left in the last, how long was that person there for?
Yeah.
That flushes out some of the culture stuff too. I think that's one of the hardest things to ask questions around. Also, I ask a lot of questions about, the KPIs. Okay,
stop. What's a KPI?
It's a key performance indicator.
I'm not sure everybody's going to understand that.
Okay.
So let's define. Why are you asking? What is it? Give us a little more sense of what KPIs are and why you ask that.
It's piggybacking on what Tim said, what the person will actually be doing. So what does their first 90, 180, even 365 days year look like? As far as what goals are they going to be held accountable for? What's expected out of them.
That's interesting. So you're in essence saying, what do they have to have accomplished in that
Yes.
30, 60, 90 days? How often does the manager actually know that?
Almost never. And a lot of the time it's, and you have follow-up questions, but you can kind of dig some of that out. But a lot of the time it's, hey, I need an HR person or I need a recruiter. Okay, for what? As he said, okay, then what are their goals going to be? Because obviously there's different models of recruiting. There's different types of HR roles, and goes on down along.
Am I managing 40 recs or am I managing
Exactly.
6 recs?
You
I mean,
know.
there's a big difference in expectation,
Exactly,
right?
and then that'll give the candidates a little window into what to expect, and then the managers can make it easier on themselves. They can ask questions based on the goals and KPIs versus just, have you done this before? You know, what have you done in your past? I think that'll make a match more likely versus just kind of more of the generic questions.
So you're talking about results or performance-based
Definitely.
to a certain extent. So going back to the job descriptions though, Tim, why do you think there's such a disconnect? Why do you think so many managers, and this is, I don't think it's all the fault of the managers,
Right.
but why do you think so many people rely on the job description, and even managers point back to it, when we really need to uncover more?
Because no one really knows how to write them, and a lot of time it comes from HR. So it's the manager will say, hey, I need this, this, and this. HR will then create a list of things because that's what the manager asked for, but it's not really what they actually need, because it's tough writing job description.
But it fits into a job category. I mean, I think the purpose of a job description is to have a job category, but then it's taken too far and it's applied to every specific job across the board, and they're all different because they're different managers, different departments, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely.
We have clients that totally different roles, totally different parts of the company, but you look at the list of things they want people to have. Microsoft Office, must be fluent in Excel, must be a team player. Half of the things they
same.
look for would be the same from a VP down to, you know, somebody that's just an administrator.
Yeah.
And there's always the same blurb about the company, and it's one of those where there's just not a lot of information there. It's almost like a leave behind for people. Hey, I've talked to you, here's some more information about the role, just to have something to show them after you talk.
So last bit of parting wisdom for recruiters, Tim, and then Andrew, I'm going to go to you, and that last bit of wisdom that you'd give to a hiring manager about the intake sessions. You first.
Yeah, so for recruiters, we just need to ask why. I mean, almost be like a 5-year-old. Well, why is this? Why is that? Why do you need this? And ask between the lines. You have that list on the job description, but why is that important? What are they trying to get at?
Key. Why is that important? Too
Right.
often we just take and run with it. The manager said so. It must be that's enough, instead of really what's driving behind it.
Absolutely.
Parting wisdom for the hiring manager, Andrew.
2 pieces of parting wisdom. Number 1, take an active interest in the job descriptions. If you don't hire people all the time, I understand, but you really want to at least look it over, maybe make some tweaks, add some things, because it's going to make it easier to find the right people and eliminate people that really have similar skills but aren't going to be able to do the job you need them to do. Second of all is attend the intake calls, especially if whether it's an internal
Key.
recruiter or it's an external recruiter, you name it. I know our results are majorly better when you have hiring managers on the call, at least one, so that you can agree on the things we're looking for, especially the stuff outside of the job description, and then go from there. Again, eliminating those people that look on the outside like they're fits, but then don't have a lot of the skills you need.
Great advice. It's like a domino effect. Intake is that first domino. If that thing falls, everything else falls, nothing works, unfortunately. Thank you guys for your input on this. This has been another session of Recruiter Fuel. Check us out 1 week from today. We've got more coming your way.